friends, welcome to the season 1 finale of Hello Friends, the Mr. Robot review show. Thank you for joining me. My name is Kyle. If you've seen the other 9 episodes, thank you so much for your love and support. And this is the season 1 finale. I can't believe that we are already here, but really strong episode that wraps up a really strong season. And I was excited and a little anxious to finish this. And I'm sorry, I know it's going up a little bit later than usual, but hope you guys can join me for this hurrah to close out season 1 and to kind of celebrate and look forward to ahead what's in season 2. So here we go. Alright, so season 1, episode 10, season 1 finale. The show opens up with a shot of Michael, who we here find out his name is actually Lenny. And he's meeting with Krista for dinner, and this is after Krista has been told, or after Elliot blackmailed him essentially, and he was like, you need to tell Krista everything or I'm gonna leak everything. And then turns out there were some Ashley Madison dumps and everything got leaked anyway, but Elliot was trying to do right by Krista here. So Krista knows everything, but it looks like Lenny here actually called her to meet for dinner so he can talk to her. Krista kind of reluctantly goes in there to meet him, and he says, you know, someone hacked me, one of your patients, Elliot Alderson, and we need to talk about it. He's like, I spoke with the local authorities there. I caught him with my dog who was microchipped at the vet, so I know he's out there. They've been trying to track him down for 6 weeks. And Lenny then tries to tell Krista that he is the enemy, and you know, this kid is committing a real crime here, he says. And he's like, don't you remember we had a good time here? He's like, we were good, you know? I mean, it's kind of a scummy move. He's trying to turn like a hack and his bad actions into like a fond memory, but Krista can see right through him. So Lenny says here, you know, Krista, is there anything that he said in your sessions? There must be something that we can help. You know, the police need a lot of evidence to catch this kid. And Krista just says, no, I can't help you, and she storms off. So Lenny gets back to his apartment. He is kind of bummed out. He doesn't know what to do at this point. He's got some fast food. He turns on the TV to see that the hack has been executed. And we get Time Zone's World Destruction playing over the Mr. Robot title card here. And a really cool video of people rallying. The news is saying massive European hack, the government's crumbling. We find out that all credit cards are not working, it's cash only, and we'll go into this more in a little bit, but it's a crazy hack and it's a really cool way to kick off the season finale. So then we get, after the title card, we get Elliot, who is asleep in the black SUV, which we find out is Tyrell Wellick's SUV. There's a parking attendant that comes over and knocks on his window, and it like startles Elliot, wakes him up, and then he goes out, and the guy's like, hey man, what's going on? And there's a really cool bit here because Elliot first says, who am I? The guy's like, excuse me? And he goes, I mean, where am I? And so that's a cool little Mr. Robot tidbit that we're going to go back to later on. Again, I don't mean to keep pushing everything out to the end here, but I don't want to spoil any future like foreshadowing for anyone who hasn't seen the series before. So the parking attendant tells me you've been parked in a lot for the last 2 days. He goes, you know, as much as you paid me before the credit card systems went down, I would need some cash. And Elliot turns to us and he says, this is Tyrell's regarding the SUV. He does a great job here. Rami does a great job of looking around, like really confused, really like he just woke up. He's got no idea what's going on. Obviously, us as the audience doesn't know what's happening either. But the guy is like, dude, don't tell me you don't have any cash on you. And he goes, you're out of luck for a while, buddy. And he's like, how long have you been asleep? Elliot's like, I'm not sure. And then he's talking to us. He says, seriously, what do you remember? Wait, I don't even trust you. And Elliot just kind of slowly walks away. And the guy's like, dude, I'm going to tow your car tonight. Like, I'm towing your car. Like, you can't just leave your car here and not pay me. So we cut to the arcade where the members of F Society are drilling holes in their equipment. Elliot shows up. They're like, Elliot, where the hell have you been, dude? Darlene says, you know, you executed the hack without telling anyone, which was messed up because we were all supposed to do it together. She's like, and then you've been gone for another 3 days. Where have you been? And Elliot, this is news to Elliot. He's like, 3 days, dude. He's like, I don't know what's happening. I don't remember anything. So Elliot goes to one of the computers in the arcade, and he starts Googling F Society, and there's a ton of articles mentioning like F Society strikes again. This time it's lethal, a coordinated attack with China, global outrages, gridlock, basically confirming that the hack did happen. And Elliot apparently didn't know about it, even though he's the one who apparently set it up or executed it. So Darlene says people are rallying to join F Society now. They love the hack. Everyone's like all for F Society, which we'll see throughout this whole episode here. And she goes, Elliot, what's going on? And she says, are you still seeing him? And Elliot says to us, no, but I need to. And he starts to walk away. Darlene kind of grabs his arm, and she's like, dude, you can't just leave. We need your help. She's like, we're cleaning up this mess here, and like, you just keep running off. Elliot says, I told you before we shouldn't have done the hack. And he just walks away. So we cut to Allsafe, where Gideon Goddard is meeting with his part-time CFO here, but sort of like his accountant. This woman, I don't know, I didn't get her name. I don't think he mentions her name at all, but basically they're part-time CFOs, and she does the money portion. But they're going over the expenses, and they're like, we gotta call it, Gideon, like, Allsafe is done. We can't recover from this. Our number one client is just like wrecked. They have nothing now. And she's like, the best thing to do is to tell the employees like that we're shutting down so that they can look for other jobs. But then, and Gideon's like, no, we can fix this, just buy me some time. And she's like, Gideon, it's over, man. And the worst part is that she says their 401ks were all tied to the markets, so that's all gone. And that's the one that Gideon's like, oh dude, like I'm gonna ruin all of these people's lives, and just give them the worst news I could imagine. She does say, there's a silver lining here. If what they say about these F Society hackers is true, she says you'll now have no debt. So really, really interesting. Like, F Society's mission is to eliminate the debt, but now it's like, for the moment, credit cards aren't working. For someone like me, I never have cash on me ever. I use like things like Venmo and my debit card to pay for everything. So if this were to happen in real life and I couldn't use my debit card, I would be screwed. I wouldn't know what to do. So this is what makes it so grounded in reality, is actually a really cool bit, and what adds to the story to already an amazing world that's been created. So then we get this amazing sequence of Elliot getting out of the elevator at E-Corp, and it's just complete chaos. There's some really great lines here. The score is really great. It's almost like circus music mixed with like a techno vibe. Very, very cool. Elliot's looking around, and he's in his typical hoodie, and there's all these guys in like business suits, and they're like throwing around papers and like scrambling to find out what happened or how they can fix this. Elliot says to us, why did Tyrell let this happen? He was with me. I told him the whole plan. He was going to stop it. And then he says, a simple program. A worm that can make data unreadable. Malware that took Darlene maybe 2 hours to code. He goes, is that really all it takes to kill the world? And he goes, shouldn't I be enjoying this? And then he's like, why am I even looking for Tyrell? Isn't this what we wanted? And then there's a cool shot where the TV in the background says the U.S. rushes to obtain cash, which don't know how that works, but obviously that's like a crisis scenario. And he says, so this is what a revolution looks like. People in expensive clothing running around. Not how I pictured it. We get a shot of Barry O there, Barack Obama. And then Elliot just keeps saying to us, I wonder which stage they're at. Denial? Muttering to themselves? No, this can be fixed. Maybe bargaining, forcing their techs to work overtime to try and decrypt our data. And then there's a line where he says, but all of their data is actually gone for good. He's like, we did you dirty, dude. Like, you're not getting this back. And I put in my notes here, this is Mr. Robot at its peak, where the music is picking up and just the idea. The hack is mentioned from the first episode, and it's now that it's executed, you're seeing the ramifications, and it just throws the world in complete chaos. And this is cool because it hits home, which we'll see at the end of the episode too, which we'll go into, but like, it hits home because it's realistic. I mean, how many things are tied up into banks, and we rely so much on digital currency. And these different systems, if someone like an F Society were to hack and get rid of that data, that's it. I mean, the money in my bank account, there's a number in there. If someone were to say, yeah, you have $0 in there, who am I to prove that they're not wrong? So it's crazy because technology has made our lives better in so many ways, but we rely on it so much that it really goes to show you how cool this hack is, because if something like this were to happen, the world just goes in shambles and it's like complete chaos, and we will see that as this episode goes. So a woman asks Elliot if she could help him. He's like, I'm looking for Tyrell Wellick. She's like, he isn't here. And then she's like, he doesn't work here anymore. She's like, why do you need to see him? And Elliot just kind of walks away, like classic Elliot, without saying anything, and the woman's like confused. She's like, all right, dude. But then we get another F Society video, some really cool shots here where they have kind of a montage of shots where Elliot walks over to the camera and he gets front camera there in front of a bunch of E-Corp people. We get a montage of Gideon Goddard in front of his people. So there's like the different groups here. Basically, F Society is like celebrating their hack and announcing to the world their hack. And they say, we at F Society will smile as your dark souls die. I was like, dude, that's cool. A bunch of people with F Society masks gathering in Times Square, which is cool. And this gave me chills because, like I said, this is peak Mr. Robot. This is what makes this show so special, is this idea of unification over a crazy event. And just seeing the cool ideas wrapped into the show kind of coming to life finally. And we still have 3 more seasons to expand on that, so that's exciting. But this is a great finale for an amazing season. So F Society goes on to say in their video, we hope that you forge a better world, a world that values free people, a world where greed is not encouraged, a world that belongs to us. We are F Society. And at this point I was like, let's go, dude. I was like, this is a hype video, basically. But this is, as someone who pays a bunch of money in student loans every month, I can't imagine how cool it would be if they were just like, oh yeah, we hacked this and now you don't owe student money. You're like, your debt is gone. I would probably be doing the similar things that these people are doing in the streets and chanting F Society and rallying and celebrating freedom, because I know all of us, at least in America here, are most of us are in debt. So whether you owe a little bit of money or a big amount of money to something, you all owe something, whether it's a car payment or student loan or just a mortgage payment. If that was all just gone, it would be insane. It would be a revolution, as we see. So we cut back to E-Corp, where a dude is being prepped for makeup. He kind of snaps at Angela. He's like, where's my bag? I need my bag. It's very precious. The bag is like right next to his desk. Angela's like, dude, calm down. She just like picks up his bag and he like clutches this thing like his life depends on it. And that's kind of a short scene there. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. It's been a long day. He's like, I'm just not used to all the new faces. But this guy's clearly stressed out. So we go back to Darlene, Mobley, Trenton, and Romero, who show up at a kill shelter for puppies. And I was like, oh no. And then the guy says, you're lucky my boss is at the bank, just like everyone else. He's like, this will burn everything to a crisp. And there's a great line where they kind of unlock the door and they look in there and it's like a burnt oven. And then Mobley says, I pictured our revolution going a lot of different ways. He says, using a dead puppy oven was not on my list. And I laughed out loud at this. And I was like, because it's hilarious and also so sad. But they throw all the equipment in there and there's a great shot of everything burning up in the fire. And then they free all the puppies, and I was like, "Yay, yas!" They just take they like hack the lock, and they're like, all the puppies are just free, which is great. So they do the right thing, and maybe F Society isn't so bad. Not only are they freeing everyone's debt, but now they're freeing puppies. So F Society is okay in my book. So Elliot shows up at Tyrell Wellick's apartment. He's knocking on the door, and that's when Joanna rolls up with her baby. This is a really cool scene because both actors in this scene are really good. Elliot asks Joanna I'm looking for Tyrell Willock. Have you seen him? Do you know where he is? She goes, who are you? And Elliot says, to us, good question. And I was like, so again, Elliot said at the beginning of the episode, who am I? Here he's saying, when Joanna's asking, who are you? He's saying, that's a good question. When it's like, oh, so something is deeply wrong with Elliot. Again, as we've seen throughout the first 9 episodes of the season, but all these little sprinkles of like a fractured mind are really, really cool to see when you pick up on those lines, and it's really great dialogue. Elliot's like, we work together. And there's some F Society wannabes, or people who are now, they all have the anonymous mask here, and there's a whole bunch of people now in the streets doing that. It's, like I said, it's chaos, so they're kind of running around, they bump into Elliot, they say something to Joanna, but I didn't pick it up. But Joanna asks Elliot, I'm sorry, who are you again? And he says, I'm Ollie. And I'm like, is that a knock on Ben Rappaport? I don't know, but he's Ollie for now. But it's a bad lie, so Joanna's like, And she says, and what were you working on with my husband? And Elliot says, to us, he says, you gotta help me get out of this. There's something about here, or I feel like she can hear us. And he also figures that she's lying to him. She's like, when was the last time you saw him? And he goes, oh, I don't know, maybe last week. And Joanna reveals, oh, that's strange. I'm a little concerned for Tyrell just between us. She's like, was he acting strange last time you saw him? Elliot's like, no, not really. Joanna goes, really? Because he was acting very, very strange the last time I saw him 3 days ago. And this is when Elliot says, didn't she say she just got off the phone with him and he's going to be home in 10 minutes? And then he's like, she's lying. And it's just like a mental battle here, like a clash, where they're both lying. And I think they both know the other person is lying, and so they're trying to read each other. And the score is just really great here. Eventually, Elliot just leaves, and I put in my notes here, Joanna is just so creepy, and the score is so great. It's almost like a horror movie in this scene. So we cut to a live recording, or a live interview, and we find out the guy's name is James Plouffe, who is apparently the E-Corp's Executive Vice President of Technology. He's the guy with the bag from earlier. There's an interviewer that says, almost $400 billion of wealth was lost just today. Are you concerned? And initially, James is like, no, I'm not concerned. He's like, we're just focusing on the technical aspect here. He's like, the public doesn't need to worry. And she's like, I don't know how you can say that the public can't be worried. Like, this is a real problem. People's lives are at stake. And he goes, the White House is going to protect everyone's money. And she goes, Mr. Plouffe, all of your data centers, including your backups, have been destroyed. She goes, I'm not really sure how you can ask the public not to be worried. And then he just goes, okay, you want me to be honest? And she goes, of course. And he says, the public should absolutely be worried. Personally, my life is over. My pension, my savings have been in this company since I started here, and it's all gone now. And Angela is in the background here along with a bunch of other people monitoring the interview. They're all kind of freaking out. They're like, should we cut this interview? And he goes, truth is, he goes, I've been with the engineering team all weekend. No one knows how to fix it. He goes, actually, the only thing we do know for certain, this will be impossible to fix. And everyone's kind of freaking out, and that's when they're like, okay, we should cut the camera now. So Angela is kind of slowly going over there, or I don't know if she's supposed to cut the camera or what's happening, or try and calm James down, and they'll cut it together or something. But it's a live broadcast, so I don't think that's gonna work. But she's going over there, and then what James does is picks up his bag from earlier, and he pulls out a gun, and everyone freaks out, and he just goes, calm down, everyone. And then that's when he opens his mouth, puts the gun in his mouth, pulls the trigger, and it's a really nasty scene, because there's his head shits back, and then it comes over, and then there's blood pouring out, and there's blood on the back window. But the guy kills himself on live TV, and Angela's so close when that happens that we'll see in the next scene the blood actually gets on her shoes, and it's a really realistic messed up scene, because this guy knows that everything he's worked for is gone. All of his money is just gone because of a hack, and it's insane. It's a life's work, and he's he's got nothing to do and they can't fix it, and yeah, it's a nightmare. So he decides the only way is to kill himself. Angela's leaving. She goes down to the lobby where she runs into Philip Price. So he goes, "Oh, you're Terry's reference, aren't you?" And he says, "You must have impressed him. Looking forward to you impressing me. You're more than welcome to go home and recover from this traumatic experience, but I'm holding a press conference in a bit." He's like, "You should join and pick up some new pointers." So Angela, who's still like completely shook from the event, she's like, "No, I'm not gonna do that." She's like, "I can't even believe you're asking that." And Price goes, "Okay." And then he just looks at her shoes that are covered in blood, and he goes into his pocket, takes out a few $100s, puts on the table, cash, and he says, "Oh, and you need some new shoes. Those won't do anymore." And Philip just walks away, and I was like, I love Michael Christopher as Philip Price. He just an amazing job. So Elliot goes back to Tyrell's SUV from the opening sequence there, opens the trunk, there's nothing there, starts searching his unlocked car, which I was like, seems weird that the car would be unlocked, but it's okay, contrary to disbelief. So he says to us, Tyrell Wellick disappears and the world is about to fall apart. He goes, "My dad, Mr. Robot, whatever the hell he is," he goes, "if he's not going to show up, maybe he got sloppy, left behind a clue." Elliot's like searching the GPS, nothing. He's searching all the compartments, the glove compartments, the mirrors. There's nothing there. There's no clues or anything. Finally, he opens the sunroof. There's a set of glasses there. He takes it apart. There's a USB chip in there. He's like, "Aha, nothing gets by Elliot." So then there's a great scene where Elliot is in the car and he's yelling. He's like, "All right, come out." And then he says, "I need to know what happened. Come on out. I'm here. I'm waiting for you." And it's just like again, just Elliot's unraveling. He's losing his mind. He's got a shattered brain, basically. He doesn't know what the hell's happening. He's trying to figure out the pieces, and he's getting frustrated because he's like, "Dude, someone needs to like fill me in on what's going on." So we cut back to the arcade where Darlene says, "We got to put these flyers out now since we can't be sure anyone's internet access will work." She's like, "I don't know why you guys are all looking at me like that. We talked about this before, first banking, then the infrastructure." And then that's when she hands out the End of the World parties featuring DJ Mobley. And Romero says, you want to know why we're not in high spirits?" He says, "It's because our fearless leader goes and shoots up the world and then disappears yet again while we're cleaning up the mess he left." That's a fair point. So Elliot shows up at a public computer store, or just like, I don't know if it's like a library or something, but just somewhere you can access a computer. And he enters the USB found from the glasses. He says he knows the password, so I know the password, talking to us. And it's called Boardwalk Fail video, or Boardwalk Fail. And Elliot watches the video, and it's the scene where Mr. Robot pushes him off the boardwalk, and it turns out Elliot was the only one there, and he fell off. He just kind of fell off. And this is a big reveal here because it's showing you that no one else can see Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot's not there. Elliot fell off, although he's trying to blame Mr. Robot that pushed him, similar to the window incident where he's saying, my dad pushed me, and Mr. Robot is like, "Dude, you jumped. Like, you felt bad. No one pushed you out the window." Same thing here, where it's like Elliot's trying to blame others for like his guilt and his actions, and it's like, you fell off the railing here, dude. There was no one else. And Elliot says to us, what's he trying to say? Am I on the hook for everything? And he says, if he won't come out to play if I ask, Elliot says, he won't come out to play if I ask, so maybe I'll force his hand. And he tells the clerk, he's like, "I need you to use your landline." He dials 911, and they go, "911, what's your emergency?" And he says, "Yeah, I'd like to make a confession." And that's when Mr. Robot hangs up the phone. And he says, "All right, dude, like, I'm here." So we cut back to Angela. She's in the shoe store now, trying to buy new shoes. The store clerk is like, "Oh, I'm sorry, is that the blood of the guy? It's all over the news." And she's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You're out buying new shoes?" And then he's like, "How can you work for those snakes?" He's like, "Have some moral fiber and quit your job." She's like, "I needed a job, I gotta pay the bills." And he's like, "You sound just like them." He's like, their practices are well documented. And then Angela just stands up and she says, "I don't know who you think you are talking to, but I'll try the Pradas next." She's like, "Yo, bring me those Pradas, because I got that money now." And we can see Angela kind of slowly transforming, being a slave to the corporate overworld. She's kind of making that path down evil, down Evil Corp. It's like, so like even though she's only been there for like a day, I mean, taking the job alone, she was questioning it before. Now she took it. Suddenly she's like, it's rubbing off on her pretty quickly. So there's an amazing shot of Mr. Elliot. Mr. Elliot. Jeez, 10 episodes in and I'm saying Mr. Elliot. There's an amazing shot of Elliot pinning Mr. Robot against the wall there, and everyone starts looking. Mr. Robot says, "You know how this looks, right? Very weird." There's like a great shot where Elliot has him pinned, and then we get like a wide shot, and it's like what's really happening, and Elliot's like choking himself. He's like, And so again, no one else can see Mr. Robot. So if you saw this, you're like, why is this dude choking himself against the wall? Everyone's staring at him. And this is both very, very sad and also hilarious. Like, I laughed out loud, but I was also like, oh, the mental problems are so real. But it's just a hilarious scene to see. Like, it's that very good dark humor that Mr. Robot does, where you're like, oh, I shouldn't be laughing at this, but it's a funny bit. Elliot's screaming at Mr. Robot. He says, "Tell me where Tyrell is." And Mr. Robot says, "You know, we made a deal that will help us both." And Mr. Robot says, "You're starting to attract some attention. I recommend getting one of those Bluetooth headsets. That way people just think you're the local douche." And Elliot tells Mr. Robot, "You know, Tyrell disappeared and no one knows where he is, but you know where he is." And Mr. Robot says, "So do you." He's like, "You forget, kiddo. I am you." And Elliot says, "No, you're not." And Mr. Robot laughs and he goes, "Oh, is that so?" And then he walks over to a random dude here. And there's an interesting scene where Elliot kind of intentionally teleports across the scene, like he's fractured. And Mr. Robot goes over to some random guy, and he just says, "Hey man," he goes, "I had sex with your mom this morning. I gotta say, it was fantastic." And this dude's like, "I don't have time for you, little man." And Christian Slater is a pretty tall guy, so this is an interesting bit too, because it's like, this guy, is he seeing him as Elliot like everyone else is, or is he seeing him as Mr. Robot? Because other people can't see Mr. Robot, we have to assume that Elliot's doing all this. So even though we see Mr. Robot in our head doing it, because we are created by Elliot, it's actually Elliot. As you can picture Rami going over to that guy, and that's why he says little man, because Elliot is shorter than this big dude he picks on. And he goes, "Oh no, it was real nice." He goes, "Smell," and he puts his finger up under his nose, and that's when the guy knocks his finger off and punches him and knocks out Elliot. So everyone's like looking over him. Some dude's like recording it, and then Mr. Robot comes over to Elliot, who's like pretty much knocked out. "You know, you're losing it, kiddo." He says, "I'm only supposed to be your prophet. You're supposed to be my God." So he picks up Elliot, and that's the end of that scene. We cut to Angela, who ends up at Philip Price's press conference, and Philip is walking by, and he's like, "Oh, I'm glad you had a change of heart." And she says, "You know, can I ask you something?" And Philip Price is like, "I'm a guy with a lot of answers right now." And she goes, "Why are you so confident? Everyone else is worried, and you're like, you have no worries." And Philip Price goes on to say, "You know, whoever's behind this, they're just people." And then he's like, "You know, well, it wasn't like aliens who invaded. It wasn't anything else." He's like, it was just someone who hacked it. Like, we'll fix it. And so they walk in towards the actual room of the press conference is, and there's a picture of James, the guy who shot himself earlier, and Angela is kind of shook by it. She looks at it, and he says, "Oh, are you still thinking about this morning?" He's like, "Honestly, I'm glad he killed himself." He said he was a drinker, he had a gambling problem, but he goes, most notably, he was weak. His instincts left a lot to be desired. And he goes, "I despise people like that." He's like, "Honestly, I think the world is a little better off knowing he wasn't in it anymore." And he says, I think even his family will benefit from this in the long run. And so he kind of just shits all over James here. Angela like can't believe it. He's like, "Dude, I'm glad that guy sucked. I'm glad he killed himself." Which is crazy, because then he goes up to the podium and there's a really cool shot with the E Corp logo there. It almost kind of reminded me of like a shot of like the First Order, the Empire in the Star Wars movies. Just an overwhelming evil force, and you see Philip Price is now like at the helm of that. And he says, "Let's have a moment of silence for our dear friend James Plouffe." And obviously, considering what he just said about James, kind of a psycho move for Philip there. So then we cut to the end of the world party, which is just in full effect. F Society talks about how, I think we got enough different fingerprints here now to cover this place. This place is like a petri dish. So the really smart move here, where it was just there, so they're in the arcade and it was just their fingerprints there before. So now they got a whole bunch of people, everyone's partying and dancing, and now there's just fingerprints everywhere. So it's pretty much impossible to track anything down. They would never search like a full club. Or the point is there's gonna be so many fingerprints there that it's gonna be impossible to track down F Society if the police do come looking for them. So they asked Darlene, what happens after tonight? Darlene says, we're finally alive now. She's like, we're finally alive. And then we cut to Times Square, where protesters are in full effect here. Mr. Robot is carrying Elliot before pinning Elliot against the wall. Because he's like, where's Tyrell? You need to tell me where Tyrell is. And Mr. Robot says, I have played nice for far too long and I am so sick of your whining. And then this whole segment here coming up is like an all-time Mr. Robot segment. And Christian Slater just absolutely annihilates this sequence. So this is going to be lengthy. I wrote down a whole bunch of quotes, pretty much, actually exactly word for word from Christian Slater, but I just think it's so good, and this is where what pushes this episode over the top in this season, that I was so impressed with this whole sequence, and we're going to go over that. So Mr. Robot says, he's yelling at Elliot now, he says, stop talking to them, they can't help us, we have to do this together, just us. And then next to him is young Elliot and his mom. She says, he's right, And Elliot says, this isn't my family. He goes, none of them are real. And then Mr. Robot is like, neither is whoever you're talking to, which is us, the audience. And Elliot has said that before. He said that he's created us, the audience. So, but Mr. Robot's like, dude, you gotta let them go. Stop talking to them, stop looking at them for answers. You have to listen to us to fix this. And Elliot says, you're not real. You're not real. And Mr. Robot says, what, and you are? He goes, is any of this real? And he says, I mean, look at it. A world built on fantasy. And then this whole part, guys, is just so good. He says, synthetic emotions in the form of pills. Psychological warfare in the form of advertising. Mind-altering chemicals in the form of food. Brainwashing seminars in the form of media. Total isolated bubbles in the form of social networks. And he goes, reality? You want to talk about reality? He says, we haven't lived in anything remotely close to it since the turn of the century. They've got the batteries stacked on the bag of GMOs. Don't know what those are, actually. And he says, while we toss the remnants in the ever-expanding dumpster of the human condition. He says, we live in branded houses, trademarked by corporations, built on bipolar numbers, jumping up and down on digital displays to hypnotize us. He goes into the biggest slumber mankind has ever seen. And he goes, you have to dig pretty deep, kiddo, before you can find anything real. He says, we live in a kingdom of bullshit. A kingdom you've lived in for far too long. And he says, so don't tell me about not being real. He goes, I'm no less real than the fucking beef patty in your Big Mac. And he says, as far as you're concerned, Elliot, I am very real, and we are all together now, whether you like it or not. And he stands behind Elliot's mom and young Elliot. Really, really powerful speech here. The Mr. Robot theme song is picking up. And the F Society protesters are kind of closing on Elliot, and the music is increasing, as I said, and Elliot's like, no, it can't be real, it can't be real. And he closes his eyes, and he just wants it to go away. Suddenly he opens his eyes, everyone is gone. And Elliot looks up at the big monitor in Times Square. Mr. Robot says, no, you don't want that, remember? He says, remember how you felt when you were alone? You were in pain. You were miserable. He's like, that's why we're all here. He said, those lonely nights when you sat and cried in your apartment, you begged us to come to you and asked us to come to you. He's like, you needed us to come. Elliot says, no, leave. He's like, I want you to leave. And young Elliot says, we're deep down inside you, Elliot. You can't leave us and we can't leave you, ever. And then the song Sound and Color by Alabama Shake starts playing, and it just fits perfectly. It's a perfect song here, because it's kind of this nice harmonic sound where the anger and the buildup of Elliot kind of spoils over, and then Mr. Robot is like, we're here to help you, Elliot. We need to fix the problem you're having. And he's like, you can't just lock everyone out, because like that's when you were alone, like he says, alone in your apartment crying, and you can't isolate everyone. Like you have to open yourself up, and we're here to fix you. And Elliot, this is where it gets sad, because Elliot's like about to cry again, and he says, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And Mr. Robot leans into the screen and he says, I'll tell you exactly what you need to do. He's like, you're going to start listening to us. And he says, the world is a better place because of what we did, Elliot. You're going to realize that one way or another. And he goes, here's what I need you to do now. So we get a montage of Elliot following these instructions here. It's really nice. He says, you're going to go walk to the subway. And again, Sound and Color is playing in the background. It really is nice here. It picks up, really emotional scene. He says, you're going to go get on your train. And then poor Elliot starts crying during this montage train sequence. He says, you're going to get off at your stop. You're going to go home. You're going to go sit at your computer. And he's like, you're going to watch and enjoy the beautiful carnage we have created together. And there's a shot of Elliot behind his computer, and there's all the F Society videos and all the rioting, and or not the rioting, I should say, the protesting, and the people gathering, and this is what they put into motion with the hack. And then we get lots of real footage of like numerous politicians and people filling the streets for like numerous protests there. There's a loud knock on Elliot's door, but Elliot does feel, ever since Mr. Robot tells him what to do, he feels very calm, and it has to do with the music too, but Elliot doesn't look as worried on his face. There's a loud knock on Elliot's door, and just as Elliot goes to open the door, cuts to black. And I was like, Sam Esmail, you magnificent bastard. But that's not all. Then we get a post-credit scene, and I almost missed this, except I was fast-forwarding to kind of listen to the credits or the music, because Sound of Color was playing, and it's a great song. And we get a post-credit scene, and so this is actually where a black limousine pulls up to like a big mansion, and this is what looks like a 1% of the 1% party. It turns out there's like a woman playing harp there. We follow this man, go meet with Philip Price. There's a quick convo between them. The man tells Philip, your troubles seem to be weighing on you heavily, but you're not. I'm not sure why, because it seems like you know who did the hack. He's like, I do. And he's like, and we'll take care of it personally, as we always do. And he's like, you seem a little preoccupied yourself. And that's when the man says, I don't believe in preoccupation. And Philip gives a good laugh. And he says, more of an observation. And he tells the story about the infamous Emperor Nero in Rome played a very similar instrument to the one the woman is playing with the harp there. And he's like, telling the story, and then we get the White Rose watch beep. And this is big, because there's a man playing this role. And this is BD Wong's character, but this is the first time we find out the White Rose is trans, or portraying this, White Rose is one persona, and BD Wong plays this other, like this, I don't want to say diplomat, but he's kind of the businessman who goes and meets with the Philip Prices and the other people, and there's two parts here, and this is a big reveal that I probably didn't pick up with on the first time, but having just watched that episode recently with the watch beep, remember every time the watch beeps, another minute has gone by. And so this is crazy. And then there's an ending shot where he just says, and he watched Rome burn. This one, as we started with season 1, episode 1, with a perfect 10 out of 10, this one I would say matches that. This one I think is also a perfect 10 out of 10. And it's probably better than the pilot, but if I can go higher than a 10, I probably would, but this is just an amazing episode from start to finish there. So I remembered most of this because I feel like the sequences are so memorable between the technology guy shooting himself. I remember that because that was very shocking the first time I saw it. So as soon as that guy came back on screen, I was like, oh yeah, this is the guy that blows his head off on live TV. The whole protesting is cool. There's like a great montage of everyone wearing the anonymous masks. Like when Elliot's going home, they're like, I just love like the scene of chaos. Like obviously in the real world I don't want that, but for a TV show or movie, it's always like so crazy to view and really interesting to shoot. So yeah, 10 out of 10 for me. So what we're going to do, this is going to be a little bit different, so I'll just kind of recap at the end of each season here. You're going to see here the titles and the scores for every episode there. So as you saw, episode 1, titled Bonsoir Elliot, gave that a 10 out of 10. Episode 2, Ones and Zeros, gave that 8.3. Episode 3, Perfect Maze, an 8.7. Episode 4, Monster, gave that one an 8.9. Episode 5, the Bill Harper episode, a 9.2. Episode 6, Zero Sum, was a 9.3. Episode 7, Blip, was a 9.5. Episode 8, Unraveling, was a 9.6. Episode 9, The Grand Plan, a 9.8. And then episode 10, the season finale, A World Built on Fantasy, is a 10 out of 10. So the scores did rise every time, and I think that speaks to the season because I think it does get stronger and stronger. You just see that big dip from episode 1, which got a 10, to episode 2 that got an 8.3. But I think the first and the last episode of this season are just so good that I think you have to leave them at 10s because it just comes full circle in the first season, how it's, from where it starts, and then at the end they execute the hack all in one season, and it feels like it's been longer than one season, but it's just crazy, and everything has come so far. So the White Rose for every episode here. Episode 1 went to Elliot Alderson, played by Rami Malek. Episode 2 went to Mr. Robot, played by Christian Slater. Episode 3, Tyrell Wellick, Martin Wallstrom. Episode 4, Elliot Alderson again, Rami Malek. Episode 5 was Mr. Robot again, Christian Slater. Episode 6 was Fernando Vera, played by Elliot VR. Episode 7, Tyrell Wellick, again played by Martin Wallstrom. Episode 8 was White Rose, played by B.D. Wong. Don't think we'll see, that's the last time we're going to see B.D. in that category. Episode 9 was Elliot Alderson again, Rami. And episode 10, Mr. Robot, again, Christian. So the leaderboard, the White Rose leaderboard, we're going to keep track of this as we go through the series. Tied for first right now, ironically, and I did not plan it this way. I do the White Rose after each review, so I don't go ahead and plan oh yeah, Elliot's going to be episode 1, blah blah blah. I watch the episode, and then whoever I think stood out the best or whoever I think was the most impactful gets the White Rose award. And again, like I said, Rami's probably going to be up for a lot of these, so I'm going to try and give everyone their due diligence. But ironically, after the first season is done, tied for first with 3 each is Elliot Alderson or Rami Malek with 3, and Mr. Robot Christian Slater with 3. So Elliot had episodes 1, 4, and 9. Mr. Robot had episodes 2, 5, and 10. But that's pretty crazy because the whole thing is that Mr. Robot and Elliot are the same, so the fact that they both end up with 3 White Roses here when they're played by 2 different actors is really cool. Second place we have Tyrell Wellick, played by Martin Wallstrom. He's got 2. That's episodes 3 and episode 7. And then tied for third, the other 2, Elliot VR is Fernando Vera, episode 6 there, and then which is the prison episode. And then episode 8, White Rose goes to BD Wong. So they both have one apiece there. But again, I think both of those actors will have at least a couple more before the series is up. So we'll see how that goes. Alright guys, so that's it. Thank you for joining me for season 1. I've had a blast. Still kind of experimenting with like angles here and segments and all that. So this is going to change. I was kind of looking back at the first few episodes and I was just way too close to the camera because mostly for audio reasons, but also trying to get a better, wider shot here. Everything's being shot in 4K now. We're kind of messing with lighting, so yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Next week we start season 2, so I'm super excited for that, and we still have 36 episodes to go here, so can't wait to get to all those. But thank you for joining me. Next week we're gonna find out who's at Elliot's door. Who is that knocking? Because Sam wanted to cut that great cliffhanger to end season 1 where Elliot opens the door and it cuts to black. So, all right, guys. Until next time. Goodbye, friend.